everybody. I'm happy to be back. Welcome back to my channel. We're going to start number 11 here. I have so much fun with this book. I showed you the previous page there to remind you to put baking powder, baby powder on your work so that the pages don't stick. Now I'm going to use molding paste and a stencil, and that's my way of covering that boo-boo that I did last week where I had to put paper tape over the seam, over the center seam. So that will do that did the trick, and now I want to use modeling paste. I have thought about doing prints, but I want to repeat what we did in number 10. In number 10 we did a molding paste with a stencil, but I did not protect the pages underneath. This time I'm going to do molding paste with a stencil, partly to cover up that tape there in the center, and partly to show you once we do this, if you coat the whole page, the whole spread with matte medium, it gives different results, slightly different, a little bit more control, let's put it that way. So I'm just trying to sort of repeat the process for you, but do something just slightly different along the way. I love this stencil. I tried really hard to see if there was any imprint on it to identify it, but it's got a lot of paint on it from previous work, and it no longer shows the stencil name or number, so I can't tell you where I got it. Sorry about that. But, use anything you've got that's similar. I'm just showing you techniques, not telling you what to buy. Try to use whatever you've got. Quite often you can use household products as well that give you like webbing and things like that would give you, sometimes there's silicone mats that you can put as a pot holder. Sometimes those would do the trick as well. So whatever you think you can find works. I'm just showing you the process. So I am concentrating very much on the center inch all the way up and down to cover that tape and disguise the edge of that tape, because the tape paper is slightly raised from my book paper. So that was a good way of masking the edge of it. I thought I'd spread it out just a little on the bottom to fan it out a little bit. It's semi-transparent, so it's not going to cover that paint that was there from before. I got another silicone brush that I use for things like this, and it's a great way of getting into areas and getting rid of some of the paste that you don't want, because it can fit with the point, can fit into lots of little places to flatten out the paste that you don't like. And I'm going to flatten it out a little bit. I'm trying to disguise the edge of that tape that went sideways. I'm trying to just overlap a little bit with molding paste to disguise the edge of that tape. And it's really hard to tell right now how effective this will be, but once it's all dry and once we add paint later on, it will all come out. You'll be able to see how effective that was. So I'm going to do the other side. I need to do as well some along the center, and I'm just sort of getting rid of flattening any of the modeling paste that was sticking out there. Because the center's getting quite thick and rounded there, it's really hard to use a stencil and get the modeling paste to go around that bend, but I'm doing my best. It helps to have a small paint spreader for these intricate parts. I'm going fairly thick because, again, I want to disguise that tape. So you'll see that the stencil's not sitting flat where the center roll is. So I have to smush it a little bit more when I get to that area there, like that. And any excess that went off the edge, I will scrape that away from the center fold with the edge right here while I'm holding down the stencil. Any excess paste, I'm scraping it off. And that did the trick. Some of that's a little bit messy, so I'm using a larger paint spreader to fan out from the center out to, so what it's doing is it's destroying some of the stencil boxes, but that's okay. It's giving a transition of solid paste there and fanning out to the last row of the boxes, and that makes sense to me. So once this is dry, it'll be very effective of covering that tape that was underneath. Just scraping away a little bit more that I didn't want. And now I want to distribute a little bit more randomly around this spread. Definitely want to do it all random and very different. I don't want anything to be too contrived. So just like I say, random pattern. I've had a lot of fun with this stencil, doing it like this, or using it on my gel plate to make white tissue prints that I use a lot. So you probably, if you've seen my videos, you'll recognize this stencil. It's a lot of fun. I like that it's very geometric and square, but they're rounded. They're not perfect squares. They're all a little bit oblongy, and I like that. So let's carry on a little bit down towards the, so I've got it going off the left side of the spread of the book. Now I want it to go a little lower and off to the right edge of the page in the book. And that way things balance, but they're not symmetrical. I love asymmetry. But you do what you like. I'm just showing you technique. And as always, I go with the, once I've applied it with the smaller paint spreader, I use a wider one to flatten it all out before I pull the stencil back. It's a good way of keeping the level and depth of the molding paste more consistent. But there will be, throughout this spread, there are areas where the boxes are a little thicker from the modeling paste, and that's fun, because it means that when the paint that we add goes on, it will distribute and move around those molding paste boxes in different ways. And it's all going to be a surprise, which I love, 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 love happy surprises. So I'm keeping this clean. Again, have a basin. If you were going to do a lot of this, definitely have a basin off to the side with soapy water. Murphy's oil soap works too. Anything to just keep them soaking in there. When I do gel plate printing, I quite often do something like that because I'm using many stencils. But in this case, I just use the one stencil. So you can see that it's drying, but it looks quite dirty as it dries. It looks a lot dirtier. That's just the way that modeling paste dries. So what I want to do in some of the blank areas, these are not the most high quality pencil crayons, by the way, but I like the colors. So I don't do coloring in my coloring books with these, but they're good for my mark making in the journal books. So I'm just trying to make a subtle background. Some of this may or may not show up as we work. And usually I forget about them later, and it's a surprise when some of it still shows through, and I never know. And that's the joy of doing this mark making. Mark making as an underlayer is mostly to get me in my mojo and get me just starting. It's not anything to direct my artwork. It's just a start. So I've got this gauze from my first aid kit, and I thought it reminds me of those boxes. So I thought I'd bring that out and see if I can do something very small and subtle in these calmer areas. Haven't used this before, so I'm just going to see. It's worth a try. I like to make texture and patterns on the backgrounds, and that's what I'm going for here. So the more texture you put on these pages, once it dries and you add paint, the more texture, the more the paint goes into little grooves and things and provides interesting patterns. But again, I'm not going to know if it's effective till once it's all dry and I add paint. So I'm spreading a fairly thick layer of molding paste, and I don't care if it goes up towards those old boxes. I kind of like that. I'm going to place this down, and then I'm going to use a brayer to roll it on. I don't want to press too hard. I'm being fairly delicate. And then I'll roll this gauze back and see what it did. It's ever so slight pattern. Hard to say if it's going to show up later, but it's worth a try. Let's do some in the upper right. Doesn't have to be a perfect match. Again, I don't like symmetry. So I'm balancing it by putting it up here, but I'm not too worried about exactly placing it. So I'm going to put it down again and brayer it on. This time I'm leaving it a few seconds, Maybe this time when I pull it back, it will give a better pattern. And I think that did. Hard to see. It's hard to see for you, but I know it made a slight pattern. I'm going to give you a close-up. There we go. That worked. And I decided since it was more effective to wait a bit, I'm going to reapply the gauze in the bottom left and brayer it back on. But this time I'll leave it a few seconds and see if that will help. Now let's pull it back and see. And I think I'm pulling it in a different direction this time, because as I pull it off, it pulls, yeah, there we go. That's a lot better. So I've pulled it in different directions, so I've got a bit of a crisscross. And this time I'll pull it the other way again, just to make sure I get the crisscross going in different directions. So it's subtle, but that's what I expected. You'd be surprised what you could find in your home to use as patterns. I'm always finding patterns and for example, little trays for my fluid paints. I use lids from, like little pudding cups and things like that. I use those cups. I use lids from things like little desserts that came in a little package. I use all of those as containers to hold paint afterwards. I don't throw them out. So this time I'm going to, so on the previous one, number 10, I did a similar technique, but I did not protect the paper. And when I added paint later, the paint really absorbed very much into the background paper and made it very vulnerable. And that's why the page ripped in the middle. So this time I'm going to try doing a protective coating of matte medium all across the spread, especially in the middle there. And we'll see if this holds up as a stronger canvas. It should. So I really appreciate your support. I'm slowly, after 9 months, building up my support from people. The algorithm pushes you forward even more once you reach 4,000 viewing hours. So I'm working on it. I'm getting there, and then it'll bunch me. And then I hope I'm seen by more people because, again, I'm not trying to get millions of viewers. I'm trying to reach more people because I feel like this is paying it forward for my soul to do things like this, to show you that having fun moments like this is in an art journal, not necessarily every day, but whenever you feel like you need time out for yourself, this is so fun, playful, and effective. It's just really good for your soul. So now that that's put on and I let it dry, let's paint. Let's add some color. So that was I believe this is the next day. It was good and dry. And you've got some interest showing up there. You can see there's a little bit of color showing up through the molding paste from behind. I've got the mark making some of the previous orangey smudges that were there before. So I'm just putting page protectors down, and because I am going to use a lot of fluid paint and spraying water. And this time I want to protect the pages a little more. So hopefully they'll stand the test a little bit better. So I'm going to wet that brush. It's a nice soft bristled brush. I wet it first and then I dipped it in my Indian yellow. And I'm not overthinking this. I'm just doing random spots. The whole idea is to watch in number 10 as well as this one, number 11. The whole idea is to watch what happens with paint flow over top of a textured surface. I'm going to predominantly use yellow and blue and some of this yellow green. And some of the yellow green won't stay like that. It might get a little darker. But even if I don't use a lot more of it, see, fresh out of the bottle, full strength, it's a little greener. And later on when I use a lot of blue, anytime I overlap the blue with that Indian yellow, it's going to make a green as well. So that's pretty much my predominant colors are yellow, blue, and green. I'm enjoying already how the fluid paint goes into the grooves of those boxes. I want to show you that up close. So there's a lot of paint and water on there right now, but it will eventually dry and evaporate and settle. So where I pointed there, those square tops of the molding paste, that's going to be the lighter color, and the deeper colors are where the paint goes through the grooves to the back of the page, or right on the page. But again, it's not soaking right, so it's taking a long time to dry because the paper is protected. So it's sitting on top of dried matte medium, which is more plasticky. So it's taking a lot longer for anything I put on here to dry. But the good thing about that is it gives me time to change things and wipe them back if I don't like what's happening. But so far I'm enjoying, again, I'm being very intuitive, organic here. I'm not overthinking. I'm pretty much letting things go as they will. I felt like I needed to dab that back because it was a bit too wet. There I go, showing it close up. And you can see how the paint is playing with the texture and the grooves of the stencil. I don't use the blow dryer when I'm doing something this wet. I let it air dry. So when I do that symbol with my hands, that means I'm going to do air drying. Now I'm just dabbing a little bit of that back and just lightening some of that green and coaxing a little bit of the paint around with my finger. I do that a lot. So it's already becoming interesting. I have no clue right now where this is going, and I never do. I really, the only thing I ever think of at the very beginning is my colors. Other than that, and the stencils, and if I'm going to do paste or tissue prints. But other than that, everything is a surprise along the way. And today is a little bit longer, and that's because I did a lot of experimenting on this spread. And because I had that coating of matte medium over it as a plastic kind of coating, I was able to try lots of different things, wipe them back, try a little more, go in different directions. And the reason why I do that is to show you that there are options along the way. We all have different tastes, definitely, and depends on the day what my taste is like. But sometimes these happen fast for me, sometimes they take longer. And I don't mind if they take longer, because that just means that as I'm going along, nothing's really popped out at me to say, Eureka, it's done, this is it. Like if I find I'm still not sure where it's going, I just keep going. So I'm starting off with this blue, very watered down. And as you know, I start off light and I go darker and darker as I see it needs it. But right now the value of this blue is similar to the value of the yellow. Now that it's dried, you can see it dries a lot paler. Very, very dry. I was just feeling the fun texture of it all. There you go. You can see how the paint played with the modeling paste textures. And that middle area with the tape is camouflaged. You can't even tell now. If you wouldn't have known, you wouldn't have noticed the tape there. So that worked out really well. Very interesting textures and patterns, but we're going to do more. And a lot of the background pencil crayon marks are still showing, but we'll see what happens. So I've got my wet wipes. I like to, when I buy them, I open it up and I usually pour a lot more rubbing alcohol into the bag, because I know they're trying to do less alcohol for babies' bottoms, but as far as me using it for art, I want a lot of rubbing alcohol. So I always soak it with rubbing alcohol. In that case, I didn't have it done. So now I'm spraying rubbing alcohol directly from a container and then rubbing firmly. And I could have got the same effect if I would have used a fresh wet wipe that had rubbing alcohol on it. Either way works. What I'm trying to do is wipe off some of the surface of these squares so that they show up a little bit more white. And in that area there that I just wiped, that's where the gauze was. Again, it's a very subtle pattern, but it's there. And that's what I wanted. I don't want all my patterns across the whole spread to be the same consistent size and shape. I want them all to be different. But I am following a bit of a theme here with my specs. They're all in the box. They're all boxy right now, and I'm trying to decide what kind of contrast I'm going to have, because I feel like black could be really nice, and I'm kind of overdue using black on my spreads, but we'll see where this goes. I never know until I get there. But in the meantime, I want to add more color, more value to the blue. So I'm going to start off light, but I will go darker. I'm using a Kleenex to spread it around. Could have used my fingertip, but just keep in mind, this is experimenting. Again, you might find that we reach a certain point and you go, why did I change that? What am I doing? But I'm trying to show you that it's all about playing, being in the moment, and experimenting. It's just paper. If I don't like it, I could take a very soapy, a hot water soap cloth and wipe it all off and start again, because I did the matte medium to protect the papers. So, I'm just showing you options and different ways of applying paint. Finger, Kleenex, rubbing around, smudging it, whatever. But again, you have to be open-minded, at least in my mind for my techniques. You have to be open-minded to play and just keep your mind open to whatever happens. Because quite often little accidents happen, then it sparks an idea in me immediately and I know where I want to go with it. So this blue at the bottom left of that page mixed with the yellow became green. So that balances some green around the page. And now I'm just bringing the intensity of the blue up, because I want to do my famous imprint with paper towel, dry paper towel, so I get the pattern and texture from the paper towel onto my page. And I can't do that as effectively unless I use fairly thick paint, because I'm trying to go for the high-low of the page versus the paint with the paper towel pattern. So I'm going to get it out. First, I sprayed some water to see if it's, to watch the paint spread around that way. And I'm using paper towel all the time to get because the fold in the middle of the book is getting quite rounded, it's encouraging paint and water to go right into that crease all the time. And I'm trying to keep that dry. So right now I didn't do the paper towel imprint, but I will. I'm just showing you what happens with flow. Putting more paint on and then tipping the page, spraying a bit and letting it flow. I sprayed there, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a tip and watch where the paint goes. So I'm tilting the book, and it's just fun to see what happens. As it flows to the top of the book, which is the bottom of the tilt, it also goes into the grooves of the squares, and look what happens there. It's quite interesting how it blended with the squares and changed colors. I like that. It's going to spread out and flatten when it dries, but right now that effect looked pretty cool, especially in the center on the right there, a couple inches in, that column of squares. That's pretty cool how the water, the paint and the water right there, how it flowed through there. So I'm having fun. At this point, I'm in my zone. I'm in my mojo. I have no thoughts about what's going on in my day. I haven't even got a lot of big plans for what I'm doing with this. All I know is I'm right now going to do that imprint. So I put clean paper towel down and press with my palm of my hand, and then I get an imprint from the texture there of the paper towel. It lifts off the dark paint and leaves an imprint. It didn't work so much up there, so I have to go darker. You've seen me do this often. It's a lot of fun. It's a good cheap way of getting a pattern. It's really hard to try to paint that on. It's best to reveal it by doing layers and lifting. And that's my trick, layers of paint and lifting off. And the more we do this, the more we lose those mark-making crayons at the very, very bottom, but that's okay. Now I've got a lot thicker paint, and I've got a clean tissue, paper towel, and I'm going to do an imprint again. I'm sorry my camera was off a little bit there, but there we go. That's fun. It's kind of a continuing theme of the squares, but in a very random pattern that's got a lot of movement and energy. So this is changing quite a bit already. I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do. If I'm always thinking further down, am I going to add black? Am I going to add white? Am I going to do really bold things? Am I going to put a tissue print? At this point, I still don't know. And when it doesn't come to me immediately, it means keep trying, keep playing. That's fun. So now I've got a balance of that pattern all across the spread, and that's effective. Keeps the eye moving around the page. If this was a canvas, a piece of work on a canvas for the wall, you've always got to have those rules in mind, making sure you've got balance and movement around the page for your eye to follow. I'm just spraying and lifting off so I can reveal some of that bright yellow again. So let's do some imprint on the top right. I don't mind if I overlap those boxes. I like when things touch and overlap. I don't like perfectly spaced sections. The whole idea in my work anyway is to create interest and get your eyes wandering, get your mind wandering. Let your imagination wander. So this is the pressing down and lifting off so that I reveal the pattern from the paper towel. Love it. So much fun. Looks like little waves. I'm still thinking as I work, am I going to do black as my bold contrast, white? I've already got a lot of white around the page, so I would actually consider white right now being my neutral. I want some more deep blue, darker, not deeper and darker, just more value, stronger value of the same blue. I'm going to add some water and let that roll down, flow down the page. Again, this is about playing with flow. Watch how it goes in the cracks of those boxes. Isn't that fun? I like that so much. A lot of fun. So wherever the boxes look quite white over top, that means that was a lot thicker with modeling paste in that spot. Let's tilt it the other way. And this way it just organically wants to flow around all that texture and decide where it wants to settle. And it looks a little streaky right now, but once it dries, it'll settle. I'm still thinking in my mind, do I want to use any of those tissues? Do I want to have white as a print? Do I want to do black? Because I do have some black tissue prints as well, and I did take my box out and look. And because I've decided that I do have a theme here of squares, whether they're those little ones or the bigger ones from the stencil, that is a theme. So I thought, okay, I found a piece that's got this very similar squares, but in black. And I thought, okay, let's entertain this idea. I'm not sold on it, but I'm going to entertain the idea. So I'm using my wet, clean water paintbrush dipped into clean water to tear away the edges of what I want from these tissue prints. And again, I don't know what I'm going to use. I'm just trying out options. It definitely is the same pattern, so it would work because it matches the stencil, even though it's a bigger one. It matches very much that stencil, but it's just a little bigger. But is it big enough to make a big difference? I don't know. Because again, I don't want all of my squares to be so close in size that they cancel each other out. So we'll have to see. I mean, black definitely looks good with these, and you may be a person that prefers black as your contrast with everything, but I'm trying to do variety in this book, so I'll play around with this a little and see. And I don't mind doing things like this and making it busy and abrupt and bold, but I don't like to do it. I don't keep it if I don't feel that it's right. And right now, nothing's feeling 100% right yet. Keep in mind that tissue paper disappears and dissolves, becomes clear when I glue these down. So that's why I'm still entertaining the idea of using a bigger piece of this tissue. Because I like how the squares fade, but is it enough that are they too close in size? Tell me what you think. I don't mind hearing from you. So I'm still at this point trying to decide. I'm going through the motion, but nothing's jumping out at me. And just because that's my theme doesn't mean I have to keep those. It was worth a try. I'm still toying with different positions, different shapes of those rows. But it's not jumping out at me as, I mean, they work, it's okay, but I think it's too much. And if I was to use this and glue them down, I don't know what the page is trying to say to me. I'm still not sold on this. Even when I took that into a different shape, I just don't know what the page is telling me. It's not jumping out. It might for you, but for me, I want to try something else. So I'm going to put my page protectors back underneath. What I'm going to do before I go further is I'm going to go over the entire 2-page spread with matte medium to coat the pages again and cover everything that I've got so far, because I like what I have so far and I don't want to disturb it, but I want to put another glaze. It's almost like glazing it, getting another layer of plastic over it, if you will, and that way when I try some new things, they might be easier to rub off if I don't like them. Because really at this point, I'm still not 100% sure where this is going. I always like to keep my mind open for other options. And even though at this point, which is 47 minutes or 31 minutes into the video already, you'd think I'd have a better idea, but sometimes it just goes that way. Some of my paintings are fast, some of them take a while. I don't like to stop until it feels right for me. So bear with me. I will speed up areas that I can, but bear with me. I want to show you my process. I mean, this is okay, but it's still, even though there's relief in there from the molding paste, visually it's still a flat image. I want to get more depth. So what I want to do also is play around with what I did when I painted the matte medium over the spread. Because it goes on milky and dries clear, that milky part, while it was wet, gave me an idea that maybe I want to put a bunch of white over the page and spray it down and make it milky across the spread. Making it spray it like that makes it more organic and not such a controlled edge, and I like that. So that's what happened. Just painting the matte medium over the page gave me the idea to do this. And I quite like that. It's very effective. I think that's busy in a different way. It's busy, but it's calming because it's so much white. And I'm happy with this. You didn't think I was going to do it, but that's what happened. So I'm going to spread it around in slightly different ways around the page. And the more I add water, the more it makes it milky. And it also allows that milky paint to go into the grooves again, all the crevices and grooves, and decide where it wants to settle. So I'm quite happy with where this is going. I like to create color movement and energy, and I especially like to create layers of depth and interest on the page. And it just felt like it needed more layers of depth. So this white, cloudy, milky layer is jumping to the foreground, and the darker colors with the patterns are going to the background. I'm quite liking what's happening where the squares are, where the white goes in there. But it's still very wet. We'll see where it goes. And I'm always taking a straight edge of paper towel and getting rid of extra water in the middle seam there. So let's add a little bit more white and then spray that back and let it settle. It's pretty hard to paint that milky effect. You've got to put it on thick and then spray with water and let it settle to get the effect. It's the only way I've figured out how to do it effectively. And now you can see why I put so much matte medium on my spread twice to protect the papers so that I could do all this water. And it's not soaking into the paper because it's protected. It's just sitting on the surface and moving around as I tilt the page. So this is fun. Look at how it's highlighting the yellow squares on the top left of the spread, how the white's settling into all those grooves in a very smoky way. It's not really strong white, it's very subtle. So I think I've already dramatically altered the look of this spread and taking it in a slightly different direction. Those smudges that I circled there on the right, I liked what happened there, so I'm trying to mimic that with heavy paint on my fingertip and just randomly, organically dabbing it down. And that way the eye moves around the page. And I think that helps. I think that was successful. It just brings another element to the surface. I'll just do a little bit more up there where the paper was, the paper tape. That's great. I like that. I like the movement across the spread now. And I like that it's got way different energy. So you've got these soft, cloudy energy mingling with these squares. And now it's dry, except for that middle white area. So I'm not gonna touch the right page. I'm gonna do something about the left. I'm gonna put a book to go underneath, but you know, offside, when I took that book as, when I selected that book as a height underneath this painting that I'm working on, I opened up that page of something old I did for inspiration, and it's got all my colors here. It reminded me of how wonderful it looks to have that orange as a contrast. I've already got hints of it underneath, so why not add a little bit more with a Stabilo Woody? And I've decided it's the orange I want, not that red. And I'm just going to scribble a bit of that because look at how effective that is as a contrast. So instead of having white or black as a contrast, I'm using orange. And I know these colors work well together. And although the orange is going on quite dirty over top of that blue, and later on I'll fix that, but bear with me. But already you can see that that was what I should have done because there was already up here in this top section hints underneath that got buried, hints of that orange. So I'm just going to bring a little bit more of that forward. And orange is, so when I have a contrast like this in a color, it's always what I call a pop to the spread. It just makes the whole spread pop. And that's what I think it needed. I didn't want to do black. So I'm spreading that a little bit on the bottom right so that it's sort of got a hint of it all over the spread. I don't like that round loopy shape that I made over the blue. I'm going to do something about that later. So I'm going to put that book underneath to bring the height up closer to my eyes so I can do a little detail now. I want to bring forward the look of bringing forward some of those squares. So I'm going to apply white paint to them. Excuse me. I'm going to add white paint to them. This is a white fluid, golden white fluid paint in a dispenser, fine liner. And I put a dab on some of the boxes, and then I'll use a very fine brush to spread it around a bit. You could use a Posca pen, or you could get an oil pastel and put it on its side and scrape that across the top, rub it across the top of the squares, and that would paint them white as well, only on the surface. Those are all the little tricks I use. But in this case, I'm using the white paint. And I just felt like I needed to, because I've got a lot more layers of and depth going around the spread now, I want to bring this white forward even more by highlighting these boxes. So they jump forward and all of the blue and the yellow jump into the back. I'm also doing that because some of those white squares, when they dried dirty looking. So I wanted to enhance more. I didn't want gray on the page, so I'm trying to enhance all of those squares that were gray and put white over it, just to brighten up the spread. And I thought I would add a little white to that orange because when I put it over the blue, it went dirty. And we'll see what happens here. I don't even mind that right as it is, where it shows a fragmented bit of white, but I'm going to do something different. This is just temporary. As I'm doing this, I'm glancing around the entire spread and trying to decide what if I want to do more boxes in white. But you see the difference of warming up that yellow now, making it a little bit prettier. I'm just stealing some of that creamier orange to do that one square up top a little lighter. That's better. That makes a difference. I'm still going to fix that. I'm going to spray it with water, very strong, forceful spray to shoot that paint off. And already that makes a difference. It's just really subtle, that orange. I like it. I think that's a big improvement. So I'm still deciding, you know, I've got blue on the right there, and in that part there in the middle, I decided I'd like to just shoot that into the background a bit. And in order to do that, I need to make a slightly stronger blue wash, which is like, this is glazing. And so I've got water and then that same blue color, and I'm just playing around with it until I get the right shade of blue. That works, but it's already that color right now. So I want to make it just a little bit darker. But it's still a wash. I still call this glazing. As you can see, it came out a little darker, and that I don't want to go too bold. I just wanted to deepen it a little darker like that. So what I'm doing is using the paintbrush to just dab, because there's a lot of contour here from the paste. So I'm just dabbing it so that the blue can sort of settle into the places that it wants to settle. And that way it shoots my white areas into the foreground more. I think this really helps to make movement and energy across the page. And again, I'm just dabbing because it's very wet. And because there's such a deep curve on the center fold of this book, because we're getting into the halfway point, the water wants to go right over that curved fold there and into the center crease of the book. So I'm going to have to be mindful of wiping that back because I don't want it to weaken the paper. So I'm just finding a few spots to continue deepening the blue, because I want there to be a bit of a flow of blue across the page from left to right. I think it's made a difference. Took this in a whole different direction. So now you've got the squares everywhere, but they're not the main focal point like they were before. They're definitely the theme, no doubt about that. But I've got more interest now with all these cloudy areas. So I want the blue to flow a little bit more. So there's that flat, that area right there that didn't have any texture or any detail. That's a good place to add more blue so that the left page and the right page flow together. Trying to get it away from that seam, but it wants to drop right down there like a waterfall. So now the eye flows from the top right across the middle down to the bottom left. Just dabbing away a little bit extra there. And I'll put some more full strength blue in the middle there and let it sit and settle. So I think that helped. That helped make the spread left and right more joined. I like that orange is still my contrast, my pop I mean, but it's subtle. Very, very subtle everywhere. Sure didn't know that this is what I was going to do until it happened. Now, I don't like overdoing things. If you're the type that likes to do a lot of art journaling with collage and stuff like that, by all means, keep collaging shapes and things over top. There's nothing wrong with collaging a butterfly on here or a flower, but it's just not my thing. I don't like to overdo that. If it's your thing, that's fine. It would work. But I would prefer just to play with color movement and energy. I like to leave more to the imagination. So now I'm trying to do like I did with the blue, trying to have the white flow across the whole spread. And that bright color I'm holding is actually that yellow green from the bottom right, that bottle mixed with fluid white, and it made this bright, slightly more opaque green. which works with the spread. I'm liking the balance of the white, but I want to add more white squares. And I showed you, I put a little note earlier, you could do the same thing. Instead of brushing it on, you could use a Posca pen. So this is a Posca pen, it's a fat one. Not the fattest, but it's sort of a midway. And I'm just using it to paint, just like I did with the paintbrush. They both work. I'm just trying to show you options. I just felt like I needed to spread around those squares, and in doing so, I add more white to the spread and I lighten the spread a bit. Makes it a little less harsh. I'm still trying to decide where I want to add more white. I decided I wanted to add quite a bit. Those white squares are really popping to the surface. And I like the idea of taking that row of squares there and making them white. Just, didn't plan that, but it just occurred to me to do that. And it doesn't hurt to put your book, I'm doing it just for ease of movement, but it doesn't hurt to rotate your spread around to see where the balance is. So I'm quite happy with this. I'm just going to dab a little bit more white in the top to draw the eye up there and make it a white, flat white area. I think it needed something like that. Just scraping away that last little bit of orange there that I didn't want. I'm going to put a little rubbing alcohol on there and try to rub a little more of that back. What I'm trying to do is get rid of that full circle. I wanted more of a fragmented circle. And there we go. I like that way better. Now it kind of matches the orange on the top that's fragmented and hidden. Here we go. Here's the final without the bright light shining on it. Thank you so much for joining me. There's more to come. I do this every week. The book's not full yet, so I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot for coming. Don't forget to like. Bye-bye.